Hey y'all, Governor Jeff Landry here again, and welcome to Diner Days. We're continuing to make our round around the state of Louisiana, telling people about all the things, great things that are going on around the state, using this podcast as an opportunity to basically tell the truth and to cut through some of the media that sometimes doesn't report everything. So today we're at Tuchmann's, one of my favorite spots here in Lafayette, Louisiana. This was actually the place we did our last Diner Dash when we ran for governor. We got a great guest today. We're going to be talking about a very important topic, which is insurance. I know it's on everybody's mind. So stay tuned for Diner Days. Today we've got a special guest, Mark Tuchmann, who is actually was born and raised in Connecticut. Is that right?
Connecticut, yeah.
And we're here to talk about insurance because the insurance crisis is something that is affecting not only folks in Louisiana, but around the country as well. People don't realize it. They think that Louisiana is just unique to its insurance crisis. We've certainly got our unique problems when discussing insurance. And so we brought Mark here to discuss that. The interesting thing about Mark is you were in the commercial trucking business. You were a small business owner at one time. Is that not correct?
I was. I'm not sure how I did that out of college, but it was not the original intention, but transportation's in my blood, so really enjoyed kind of building that over 25 years.
So really and truly what you did was you started off as a small business owner. You saw an opportunity. You wanted to get into the transportation business, and then you grew that transportation business.
I did. So started in Connecticut and then grew it national. So we had about 100 and some odd terminals, about 4,000 drivers, all over the country, including Louisiana.
Including Louisiana.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually you sold that business.
I did. I sold that to private equity in 2011. Stayed on for about 3 years, and then wanted to do something different. Spent an awful lot of time when I was running the business. We talked earlier about what keeps you up at night. Insurance was one of those things, and so we spent an awful lot of time on that, and a lot of time in London. So
let me ask you, let's talk about some of what do you think were maybe the three biggest challenges that you faced as a business owner, from a small business owner to growing your company? What were, especially in the commercial trucking space, what were some of those challenges?
So probably number one, I think, was everybody, and you being a small business owner one time, I believe as well, is cash flow.
Yeah.
So, you start a business, how much you have to put up. Number two was people, right? So I always been a big advocate as maybe you're not the smartest guy in the room, but if you surround yourself with people that are, then that's how you're going to be successful. So I've been very lucky in my career that I've done that over and over. A lot of the people that work for me even today, I would say, are much smarter than me. So, but with all that, and I think that's how I got into the insurance. Running a trucking company and doing all those things, insurance was probably your biggest hurdle that you had to get over.
So insurance was a huge challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important too, when we talk about insurance and you talk to the average consumer and average citizens out there and you say, hey, what's the biggest issue in your mind? They say insurance. And it's important, I think, to divide the insurance buckets, right? So insurance kind of has, like, in my opinion, three big buckets. So you have health insurance, which people have issues with. Yeah. You have property insurance, which certainly a lot of people in Louisiana do, especially those along the coast because we have so many hurricanes out there. And then you have auto insurance, especially if you got a teenager on the consumer end, yeah. Right? And so auto insurance is kind of has two additional buckets. You have the consumer end, like we talked about, and then you have a commercial end, which you mentioned was one of your big challenges as you were growing your commercial trucking business, that insurance was a major factor and a major challenge and a headache for you on a pretty regular basis. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair, and I think part of the auto part of the insurance and the way I entered into the London market was more because of the cargo. So a lot of what my company did, we did a lot of pharmaceutical and financial, and so the cargo was a little bit unique to cover that. But the auto part is by far the hardest.
The hardest part.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is important too, because last year here in Louisiana, we were tackling a number of issues: crime, education, economy. We made some great strides. We've got a lot of great investments that are coming into Louisiana right now. Businesses doing great. We've got a 127% increase in job opportunities here in the state. And we really looked at the property side, trying to stabilize our property insurance market here because of the number of storms that have ravaged Louisiana and certainly affected property insurance rates. And interestingly enough, last year, when we went into our regular session and we started to tackle insurance reform, or what you would call, some people call it tort reform, but I call it insurance reform because I think you got to have a balanced approach. We were brought like 24 bills from the insurance companies on the property side and said, look, if you do these 24, we're going to come right back in, rushing back in. And I looked at them and we basically pared them down. We took about 50% of those bills and we went through and we passed them. The other 50% I took some heat off of, not implementing them. And then you look, but that same insurance group went and took that package over to Florida, to my good friend Governor DeSantis, and he took the whole package, passed the whole thing, and right now after 2 hurricanes, they have a serious problem. Consumers are having a problem getting their claims paid. They have no access to the courts. And so I think that to me, that showed us that you really have to take a balanced and measured approach, whether you're talking to insurance companies, whether you're talking on the litigation side, that when you look at the problems, you got to look at the data and then create a very balanced approach.
I think just anything in life, it's a balanced approach. I think the part where you look at insurance, and my role at Acrisure now is running programs and building programs, and it all revolves around the losses, right? So I think when you're balancing legislation or tort reform or rates and all those things, I think all of those need to work together. And we talked a bit about even the federal government side. So you have, especially when you're in Louisiana, you have all your surrounding states. And if you look at the commercial auto side of it, a motor carrier or a trucking company, if they're in interstate commerce, they can domicile in multiple places, or they could pick their location or their headquarters. And so part of that is, and insurance is, and it's very similar to the trucking, where we need to abide by 48 different rules and regs, and with each state. In trucking, it's similar if it's intra-state, but if it's interstate, then we're abiding what the federal government says.
So certainly if you have neighboring states that tend to have the same type of regulatory atmosphere, the closer you can align those states together, the easier it is for commerce, especially interstate commerce, to be able to move. It's interesting you talk about that, but let's kind of go back, because there certainly is a need to address both the consumer auto insurance market and the commercial auto insurance market. But most of our citizens, the vast majority of our citizens, really are honed in on the consumer side. And so let's go through a couple of statistics. So when I looked at the data, I found out that here in Louisiana, we don't have any more auto accidents than the national average. So like when you look at the data, we don't have more accidents than the average, the national average.
I would agree.
We aren't charged more to fix our vehicles than the national average, so we would say we're on par. One of the things that I found really surprising, it really took me a while. I've said it a number of times, and no one has challenged me on it, so it means my data should be pretty accurate, because the media would be more than happy to call me out on it. But our injury claim severity is actually less than the national average, right?
On the severity.
On
yeah.
the severity side, so like these nuclear verdicts or things that you talk about, that people talk about, it's actually less. However, the one outlier that's out there is the number of small claimed injuries, right?
Yep.
That's
same thing we said.
That's double the
Yeah.
national average, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and especially on the trucking side, everybody talks about the nuclear verdict and the big one. And I usually or often say it's death by 1,000 cuts instead of one. So that double that you just spoke about, add those all up. So if that's 100, 200, 300, so now you have all of those injury claims, which are, if you have and you dent the side of that building, that's pretty much cut and dry. You dent the side of somebody's body, that's exponential, right? So that could grow. So
you hear about these huge nuclear verdicts, but the thing that actually really affects the rates is what you're saying is the number of the sheer number of smaller injury claims.
It's definitely a component of it. I think the part that really makes us nervous is really the bad faith. And then we talked last time I met with you, we talked about transparency and knowing that there's potential claims that are out there. I think that's part of the void that's there. You go a year or 2, 3, and all of a sudden there's a person that was injured and they've been going to the chiropractor or had surgery in a lot of cases, and you had no idea that's even going on.
Right.
So those are the things, I think, when you say a balanced or a group approach from everybody involved, I think those are the parts we need to see work together better. And
so you would agree that there's no doubt that when you have an opportunity to do tort reform, or basically what the average person would understand, rein in those trial lawyers, then that has an effect of reducing the cost to the insurance companies, thereby creating a savings.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you need to look at is every dollar of premium, where does that go?
Right.
And what are the expenses? Is it administrative? Is it pure loss expense? Is it, so when you hear a company talk about their combined ratio, what makes up that combined ratio, I think, is where you talk about transparency. And I think that's absolutely correct, where, and we've shared a lot with you on our programs that we do in the state, and what we see from a profitability standpoint isn't a problem. It's really to be able to predict and be able to know that we're not going to have a runaway claim or things like that.
Well, that's interesting, because that confirms some of the things I found. I found that the loss ratios here in Louisiana, to some extent, are just as good as they are in, say, Mississippi, Alabama, or Arkansas, but yet we're paying twice as much for the insurance, and so it's not necessarily that insurance companies may be losing money. I think that there's opportunities out there. However, we can bring the cost down for them by instituting some tort reforms. I used ChatGPT not too long ago and asked, because I was trying to figure out if I knew what I was talking about. And one of the things, number 8, it gave me like 8 things that a state could do. I typed in, I said, what can a state do to lower auto insurance rates? And actually number 8 was limit excessive lawsuits and payouts to minor injuries. It said that. It said minor injuries. And so let me tell you a couple of things that I talked about too. So I went back to the data. So in 2019, 2020, our legislature did a report where they looked at ways under which they could rein those lawyers in, or do tort reform. They brought some of, I think, the 3 largest auto insurance carriers' actuarials into the study and said, okay, if we do X, what would it equate to Y in savings? Right? So they came up.
Yeah.
They came up with like these lists. And so like I go through a couple. They said, well, if you reduce the jury threshold, which is kind of complicated for everyone out there to understand, but it started out at 50,000. They said if you bring it down to 0, we could get a 0.5% savings. If you adjust the medical transparency, right? Which they call collateral source.
Yeah.
We could get up to 1% savings. They said if you can then use whether or not the plaintiff, the injured, was wearing a seatbelt, because it's the law in Louisiana, you got to wear your seatbelt. If you can introduce that into trial, because clearly if you're not wearing your seatbelt and then you get into an accident, your injuries are worse than if you would have had it.
Sure.
So why should I have to pay for you not wearing your seatbelt because your injury is worse? They said that would reduce it up to, you get up to about a 5% savings. Now, what's interesting, and many people in Louisiana realize, but actually in 2020, 2021, the legislature actually did those things. And yet, I can't find anyone around the state that said they received, a 6.5% savings. So you go a little further, and there was one inside this insurance finding report, which, by the way, is a public record, not a public record. I could send it to you. Actually, if anybody out there wants to contact the governor's office, we'll be happy to send it to you. It said, prohibit evidence of an insurance policy from the jury, which means less transparency, meaning the insurance company said, we don't want you to tell the jury that insurance is involved. We said, okay. They said that would be a measurable savings. That was one of the tort reform measures we signed last year. Again, it said measurable savings. Again, we didn't see it. And so when we get to this problem, as we discuss this problem, I recognized, I'm like, well, what's the balanced approach? How do we ensure that as we adjust our tort law, as we rein these lawyers in, that the savings is actually then driven back down to the consumer? And so when I looked around, I saw that Louisiana was one of the only states in the South, it's actually the only state in the South, under which our regulatory environment from the insurance department was not as transparent, or did not have the same type of regulatory power to hold rates or to deem rates as being excessive. In Texas and Arkansas and Mississippi and Georgia, which you said where you're, Florida, for instance, those insurance departments have the ability to do that. So I said, well, maybe we can rein in the lawyers on one side and create more transparency and accountability on the insurance side, and then that would create a much better policy decision at the state level.
So, well, and we've talked about those, and not that I discount those items, and I think you have an admitted world and you have an E&S world, surplus world, and I think a lot of the people that were in the room when we talked a couple weeks ago, some of them probably are in the E&S world or the captive world or some other things, right? So
that was a meeting we had with all the truckers that you
all
joined
the
us
truckers,
for. Yeah,
which I really enjoyed, and especially your knowledge and actual candor on the items. I mean, it was very impressive, and so, but I think it's not a cut and dry world. You mentioned the actuaries. Well, all of that ebbs and flows and moves, and so when you look at the insurance company's profit, a lot of that is just your actual claim dollar is a big
premiums
part of that.
collected, claims paid out.
Claims paid out. So again, the dollar a premium, how much of that is actually going to pay the claims?
But included when you look at that, that's not the combined loss ratio.
Not the combined, no. And so,
which is an important number.
A big, absolute number, and which I'm with you on the transparency piece to what that combined number and what makes that up, those expenses, admin, and all that. But to just be able to go and look at the 0.5%, 1%, all those kind of things. It's like, when a store puts something on sale, did they raise the price before they put it on sale, right? So,
well, that's true. That's actually true.
But I think when, I think, and I see from the insurance side and the Department of Insurance and the lawyers and the actuaries and all of the people, we all got to get together. Is really what it comes down to, and I think that's the balanced approach. Is all get in a room, because quite frankly, and we spoke about this previously, I think Louisiana has more of an image problem than they do an actual performance problem.
That's it. Well, that's interesting, because like I go to Texas, I travel down the interstate, and of course, look, I don't like the billboards. I really don't. I mean, you see them everywhere. I really hate them. If I could outlaw them, I would. The legislature, if they want to sign me a bill to outlaw it, I would. In 2020, actually, I wrote a bill when I was Attorney General that would restrict lawyer advertising, and actually it was passed by the Senate and the House, vetoed by the last governor. I've been asking the legislature to send me that bill. It's been 4 weeks now. I still haven't seen it on the desk. I don't know why. They should be able to get it out real quick to us. But I think that creates the image problem that you're talking about. And so some of the ways that I think that you can, or that I'm hoping that we can improve our image, is to be able to take that balanced approach, which we impose transparency and accountability in the policy making and the laws that we're doing. Like, I'll give you an example. When you look at small, minor injury claims, the ones that are double, one of the ways that we believe that again, the data says we can further reduce those and basically help the insurance companies out there is inside of what you would deem the tort reform. Is we've got this presumption that in an accident that you have to take me if your truck hits me, that every injury I'm claiming is presumed to be part of the accident, irrespective of my past medical history. Mm-hmm. I would think that would be a problem.
Well, that's part of the when they're going through and investigating it and looking and going into the backgrounds and seeing, was this a sports-related injury, all of the different things. I could share some of the claim files.
If I slipped when I was mowing my lawn, you know what I mean? I pulled my back. But
playing softball.
Right, and so we're actually, we have a bill. I'm pushing the bill. It's to undo that, to shift the burden, so that basically I have to prove to you that the injury that I received, that I'm claiming for you to pay for, was actually caused by the accident. We believe, from talking to folks, that certainly, and the insurance companies believe that would be a major policy change that we can institute. Right. I'm hoping that bill's over in the Senate. I believe that they're gonna pass it and send it to my desk. We have a big problem. I'm sure it's not just Louisiana, but you see it in other states with uninsured motors that become a problem.
Yeah, well, and I think, if we could just go back to the billboard piece for a second, because hey, they're businessmen too, and women. So them advertising and all that's not the big problem, right? I think the reason why, and it's primarily, if you get on the interstate, it's usually a trucker.
Right.
It's not the landscaper or somebody else, because the trucker needs to make that filing we make on their behalf. And so the plaintiff's attorney knows that's a pot of gold. Mm-hmm. You got hurt by a truck, they have a federal filing. There's a $750 limit today, which maybe that needs to be addressed. We talked about that as well. But
that would be addressed at the federal level.
At the federal level, but a lot of this resides in the federal level, in my view. So I think the commercial driver's license, the MCS 90, that filing that we need to make, it's archaic. And so I think a lot of that needs to be dealt with in Washington. But a lot of what you're talking about, your surrounding states are really, you need to all be similar. Like I said, truckers at least can domicile wherever they want if they're operating in interstate commerce, not willy-nilly, but they need to, if they move their headquarters to Mississippi versus Louisiana, I think those are the things that you see.
Well, again, I think that some of the things that we just talked about is distracted driving. I think the House just finally passed the distracted driving. Texas has that. I think we all can admit that one of the most dangerous things we can put in a child's hands is a cell phone, and certainly at a young age, or even in adults, right? Shouldn't be texting and driving. Yes, and of course, Forbes and everyone else said that when you strengthen your laws around distracted driving, then you certainly reduce the number of accidents. Reducing the number of accidents then reduces the number of litigation.
And we're all happy.
And that's right, we're all happy. I know one of the other things we have now, again, it's gone back to the commercial auto policies, is we're saying, look, if you're a trucker, if you own a trucking company, or you own a single truck and you have an active functioning dash camera, right, then we're going to mandate a 5% discount, because I've talked to some truckers and they said, look, we got it, but we don't get any discount for it. And I thought to myself, I think it seems as though sometimes insurance companies could do a better job on that side. I know that I get a discount if I've got side airbags and,
Right.
one of the, like the bumper alarm or back driving. So talk about the dash cam.
So, and that's come almost mainstream now. So if with the electronic logging devices that were put in place a few years back, all those type of things were telematics, but cameras, you talk to most truckers, they have, whether they're sharing it with their insurance provider, that's another story. So, those are opportunities not only where it's going to document if they were at fault or not at fault, but it's going to allow the insurance company to adjudicate the claim, settle it quickly, know where the fault may lie. So it's really, we talked about good for everybody. They're good for everybody. I mean, so from that standpoint, but we, on our programs, we give a discount, or we look at that. But I think for the state of Louisiana, if I said to you, Governor, the best place where I think you could spend your money would be in maybe a tax credit or things that you could do, because we talked also about, if you look at the trucking community, 85%, and that data might be a little bit dated there, but they're that small operator, less than 10, less than 6. They don't have the wherewithal to have.
Those are the ones that are struggling. Their barrier entry into the market is greater, because the bigger guys may get into like captives or other programs that certainly they can afford based upon them taking more of the risk. But the average mom and pop that's just trying to get into it struggles because of a barrier to entry. And so the question is, can we work with insurance companies and them, so that we say, look, if you're making sure that you have these safety devices and these things on your trucks and you're operating this manage, you can have deeper discounts. And look, we're doing that on the property side. On the property side, we put together like a fortified roof program. Alabama, I think, was one of the first states to put it in place, and there are companies in Louisiana that will give up to a 20% discount when you replace that roof. If you spend the extra $1 making it or satisfying the fortified roof compliance guidelines, you can get up to a 20% discount. And all of a sudden, the savings on the policy starts to pay for the roof. So to your point, some of the extra things that the mom and pop can do, right, can they recoup that money in form of discounts or something that either the government in conjunction with insurance companies can put together?
Well, and we're looking to reduce claims at the end of the day, right? So if we can reduce claims because you put a new roof on or fortified it, if we could reduce claims because you were investing in their driver training, all those things. And I think it's one thing for the insurance company to give it back, but I think you just told me that most of them aren't giving it back. So maybe you take control of that,
right,
and you give it back.
Well, and one of the things that's one of the reasons we're trying to create this balance approach under which the insurance commission, instead of looking at just the loss ratio, the combined loss ratio, to be able to adjust to ensure that the rates are at a point under which the company makes a healthy profit, because we don't want anybody not to make a profit, but we also don't want you to run those profits out while we make those changes. But you don't see, if we take those positions, if we take a position of a balanced approach, I think y'all have looked pretty deeply into the things that we're doing here in the state, the economic investments that we're making, the tax policy changes, the educational improvements, public safety, all of those things. You don't see a reason why you wouldn't do business in Louisiana.
I've done business in Louisiana ever since I got onto the insurance side. Again, I think it's more of an image. I remember some of our bigger reinsurers kind of questioning, are you sure? I think our approach has always been really, let's focus on the driver. Let's really help the driver. Let's look at how that's the lowest common denominator, and that's honestly for the truckers out there, that's your image. That's the person in front of your customer. Why wouldn't you want to put the best person in the seat? So if we can do all of that, we're going to have better loss performance history. And then, and listen, I shared our performance with you.
Yeah.
I wasn't shy to do that. You didn't ask for it. You know, Louisiana, if we look at our book of business across all the states we do business in, it's right there where it should be. So, so I think it's more of an image problem that we could work together. I think that takes everybody.
Right. Everybody at the table.
Including our friends in Washington. So.
Yeah, well, we certainly going to be talking to them as well. We you know, it's funny you said that, because up in Washington, we're asking them to give us some help on the property insurance side through the National Flood Insurance Program, which has really been a problem. And so we've got kind of a double-edged sword. We'll probably have to, I have to get a property insurance guy next time to come and talk to us about some of the things that are going on.
We're working on that program.
All right, well, good.
In my same group, somewhat,
well,
but yeah.
Well, look, I really do appreciate you joining us on Donna Days and helping to explain to people the complexities of what's going on, and the fact that the things that we're doing in Baton Rouge right now that they hear are not going to run anybody out of the state, or certainly allow the lawyers to just run willy-nilly through the state. I think we've taken a real good balanced approach. Maybe we'll have you back after we get all the policies and the bill signed.
We can make it reoccurring. I'm happy to come down. I'll bring a couple of my friends.
Great, because we want you to do business in here. Well, there you have it. This is our segment on Diner Days, and of course we always. If you stay with me for a few more minutes, you get to hear a little bit of Lanyap, because that's what we do at the end of our Diner Days program. And our little bit of Lanyap, which is like a little something extra, is we want to do a big shout out to LSU and Southeastern's softball programs, because they made it to the NCAA tournament, right? Yeah. We're keeping our fingers crossed for our baseball programs that are going into conference tournaments. LSU this week beat Arkansas 2 out of 3 games. So we'll see how they do in the SEC tournament. I think it starts Wednesday. And then we want to give a big shout out to Addis native John Foster, who made it to the top 3 on American Idol.
Oh.
And we hope that all of Louisiana will vote for him on Sunday, right? So we'll see.
I'm going to be
We'll see. All right, I'm going to have my usual 2 eggs and the sausage patty, homemade sausage patty, and one of those pecan pancakes. That would be great.
Well, I'm going to have to try one of those pecan pancakes, but I'll get my normal, anybody that knows me, ham, tomato, and cheese omelet.
All right.
Yeah.
They got great biscuits here, too.
They do in the white toast and wheat toast.
That's
homemade.
right. Yeah.
You throw one of those in, too?
Yeah.
All right, that's it for y'all?
That's it.
Awesome. Drinks, unsweet tea?
Unsweet tea?
Yeah.
Cup of Joe.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
All right, well, again, this ends our Diner Days for this week. And again, Mark, we sure do appreciate you coming down and sharing some of your insight. And we look forward to having you bring your business here to Louisiana so we can help our consumers and our business folks out there lower their insurance rates.
Well, great. Thank you, Governor.
All right, thank you. Take care.
All right.
All right, live from Tuchmann.